Welcome to Stacking Growth Call to Action, a show for the trailblazers, changemakers, and paradigm shifters. Each week, a different marketing hero who is called to make a change in their field will walk us through each step of their journey. They'll cover the highs, the lows, and what's coming next. Together, we'll help you find the changes needed for your own business to win. I'm Steph Crugnola here with Evan Hughes, and today we're so excited to welcome Refine Labs VP of Demand Creation, Ciara Hopkins. Ciara is bringing us her expertise on Refine Labs' commitment to fixing funnel disparity by focusing on accurate reporting and data integrity. Not all leads are created equal, and Ciara is here to help us understand why and how to address it. Ciara, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. It's nice to be here.
I'm so excited to learn from you, but before we get into the nitty-gritty details, can you tell us a little bit about your path into marketing, maybe some history with leaning on the traditional marketing funnel structure?
Yeah, totally. My career actually started in sales, and I was an SDR way back in the day. It was like right out of college, and I was cold calling people that had filled out a guide. And then I also was calling people that had filled out a demo for the company that I was working for. And it was just like I just remember I don't even know, like 22 right out of college. And I was like, I would hate when I got the content leads because I'd be like, oh, these are the worst. Like I literally would call them and these people would be like, I'm sorry, what did I fill out? Like, why are you calling me? And it was back in the day when like we had to call and email, but the first thing we did was call. And so I was like, oh, like, as like a 22-year-old, I'm like, I don't know, like my boss told me to call you. And like I'm being like tracked on activities, like a call or an email. And so I'm like, I just got to get my activity goal in for the day. And so I just remember thinking like it was really weird that I would call someone because they filled out a guide like 5 minutes ago. And some people would be like, I literally just filled this thing out. Like, why are you calling me? And I'd be like, yeah, that's a really great question. So anyway, I like didn't think about that. So I was just a young child out of college. And then I moved into marketing. And so I was like on the other side of the house and I was running marketing campaigns that were generating, content download leads. And I was trying to figure out types of content to get, how to promote them. And then I kind of moved my way through demand generation. I started a little bit in the customer marketing realm, moved into like demand generation, lead generation. Actually, at the time, we called it lead generation. And I worked my way through a few companies where we were doing the same thing. Like we were trying to get folks to fill out demos, but we also were just trying to figure out content that we could gate and put on our website and just get people's names. Because I just wanted a list of people that I could give to sales and then they could do their job and, try to convert these people. Um, and then I came to Refine Labs and all of the things started kind of clicking around the things that I'd been thinking about for almost a decade of my career of why am I trying to get these people's, names and contact information by filling out a form or a content download form. And so I moved my way through Refine Labs. I've been here for almost 3 years now. It's been an exciting journey. I started as a director of demand generation working with clients, and now I'm leading a team of demand gen managers that are also working with clients. So really trying to bring a lot of the learnings that I've kind of started my career with into life in this current role. So excited to be here.
That's a journey that I wish most marketers would experience, right? Going in the cold calling, just calling numbers and getting screamed at, hung up on, why the hell are you calling me? I feel like that's something that a lot of us can empathize with when we're trying to understand our early points in career, especially as marketers. Like, what do I need to be doing? Why am I doing this? So I think that background is going to resonate with a ton of people, especially myself. I was never in that SDR role, so like I like to assume I know what it's like, but I have no idea. So to kind of come into that, I think it shows just that evolution of your journey is so much more evident in why you make that shift. Because it's like, I'm doing this because it's a job out of college and they tell me to do it. I'm
Yeah.
starting to think a little bit more critically about this, and it's not necessarily meeting the goals that I need to hit. Why am I doing this? Like, I don't want to be doing this any longer. So, I mean, it makes total sense, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
There's the I feel like that's kind of the inflection point you talked about as you step through like each step of your career. But I'd love for you to kind of talk us through, one of these moments where you knew you needed to make that change. So you kind of jumped to different parts of your job stages, but when were you like, all right, this is time to where I need to start cleaning up data. I need to start having data integrity, making sure that what I'm doing is adding value for the business.
Yeah. So, okay, so I was a sales rep for a little bit, and then I moved into marketing, and then I kind of just forgot about like all the things I thought about in sales. And then I moved into another role that was a little bit more demand generation focused at another company. And we were like, so I would say like we were pre-marketing. Like they hired me to do demand generation, but we had nothing set up. And so I was like, okay, I got to put my sales hat back on. Where are the MQLs? Where are the opportunities? And like nothing, I'm not even kidding you. Nothing was set up in this in our CRM. And so my jobs shifted from less about like demand generation strategy and more to like how do we foundationally set up a reporting structure so we can use actionable insights to create a strategy for demand generation. Demand gen because that's what I call it now, but it was literally lead gen back in the day.
Mhm.
And so at that company, I was really focused on marketing ops, and that's when I got pretty excited about marketing operations. And I was like, okay, there's things that I can do here to start to track, where the leads are coming from, how they're getting in the funnel, how we identify them. And then I moved to another company where the CRM was set up perfectly, and I had to do like a few different things. And so then I'm trying to like finally starting to use my, demand generation hat. And I remember this point where I was setting up like UTM values for our leads. And this company, we didn't think about things in like high intent and low intent. We just thought about like the funnel, the lead funnel. And that was how I knew it at that point in my career. And I was like, yeah, it's a lead funnel. We just have things that come in from LinkedIn lead gen, or we have things that come in from Google search or direct and organic. And I remember trying to just like get these content leads that we were spending money on to get through the funnel. And I was like, oh my gosh, like something is wrong here. Because I couldn't try to prove out the value of these leads because I knew exactly what it was like as a sales rep to be like, yeah, you guys need to work these content leads, but they didn't want to work the content leads because they weren't converting and not helping them meet their quota. But I was spending money on them because I was spending money on, Facebook and LinkedIn and paid in Google search. We were driving content leads and not demos. And so I just remember this moment of like, oh my gosh, like I have to look at this differently. I have to, and this was also kind of the time when I started to follow Chris Walker and Refine Labs and started thinking about like the Refine Labs the podcast, and I was like, I have to think about this differently. So that was definitely like a big inflection point in my career, I guess career, but also just like my knowledge of lead generation versus demand generation. um and it was like I just distinctly remember the day that I was like, this isn't working. And it's kind of cool that I'm talking about it with you guys today, so
No, it's awesome. That click, that aha moment. I mean, it's almost for me, it was almost embarrassing at that moment because I was like, wait, what have I been doing this whole time? But in the
yeah.
best way, right? Like I was holding myself accountable to new goals and new ways of thinking about things and challenging myself. And I think what you described is so relevant to most of us is operating in silos, right? So you were the marketing function and the ops, and you were starting to build out like the infrastructure needed to succeed, but wasn't necessarily in like conversations with sales, understanding how they're utilizing them, understanding quality index of measures. And I think there's the intent piece is the biggest piece here that I hear you saying is the most valuable to understand.
Yeah, I think there are two things that I really learned, I feel like, in that kind of period of discovery and exploration. And the first thing was, the first thing was intent, right? And so I like really, it's like, and I think about intent as categorizing offers on your site, or even just how you're bringing folks' information into your funnel. And so an offer, I would say like a demo request is an offer. A content download that's on a gated, piece of content, that is an offer. A webinar form, that's an offer. So I think about offers as categorizing in the high intent or low intent. And what we were doing at this company I was working at is we just said like all the leads were coming in, and then we were just sending all of them to sales in the way that they came in. And of course, you're going to get so many more of those content downloads, webinar leads, because it's just an easier, lower barrier to entry for someone to fill that out versus the demo requests. So there's that, there's the intent. And then the second piece was this like notion and importance of UTM tracking. And a lot of people are like, okay, well, UTM tracking is going to tell you what channel things are coming from. And that's true, but we have to think about organic and direct as a channel as well. And something I think that's crucially important that I wasn't doing in my career at this time was I was just measuring like, okay, LinkedIn's bringing in this, Google search is bringing in this. Here's how much money I'm spending on LinkedIn. Here's how much money I'm spending on Google search. And here's what I'm getting out of it. Very linear, which that makes sense, right? But when you start to implement UTM tracking on your leads, then you see how many leads are coming in that don't have UTM values, or that have UTM values that are organic from Google or organic from Microsoft or whatever you want to say. And that is where I think is where it's really important, because you're spending marketing dollars and you're generating organic and direct interest. And so I was really trying to reframe like how I'm thinking about that, and how I'm going to talk to my my executive and senior leadership about how I can showcase the value of organic and direct traffic and leads that are coming through the door. So two things: UTM tracking and intent.
Yeah, the UTM tracking one is like a whole deep dive too that I want to have one of these conversations around in the future, because just like the implementation, but even just thinking about that trackability. So the UTM early, right? That just like direct response was the marketing's objective. Drive leads, whatever channel, report out in silos. So cost per lead for LinkedIn, cost per lead for Google. All of it was like basically building out slides is what I envision, and most of us have done, where it's just like a slide on Google. Here's the performance results and everything. Here's LinkedIn. And we kind of omitted this whole concept of brand, organic, inbound, because that kind of operated as like the SEO or the brand team. And you don't realize, or for me, it was like that moment of, holy shit, this money is going into these channels. And myself, just like if I was to purchase like clothing offline, like I see it and then I randomly go directly to the store to purchase the item. I'm not necessarily clicking through the ad when I'm like being a bum scrolling on social media on the couch, right? It's like when there's intent there or the intention's right, then I'll do it. And like, how did you find that leadership responded to that initially? Like when you tried to introduce that, because I think that's the hardest part, right? How do you sell that idea that like, well, it's not going to be quantifiable. There's no really like ROI on this that I can say, but we're making assumptions. I think that
Yeah.
that's a big unlock for a lot of people.
Yeah. So honestly, it's taken a few years to kind of figure out how to tell that story to leadership to get, I said, because what's my goal? My goal is to drive as a marketer, my goal is to drive as many high intent form submissions as possible that generate pipeline and revenue down the funnel at like the highest, easiest level. And so I remember when I was in this kind of like aha moment phase, I didn't know. And I kept trying to be like, okay, well, if I can get enough money on Google search, then I can get money to like use for LinkedIn. And so I was really trying to like use Google search as this, because I mean, we still kind of do this today, is we're like, Google search is generating direct leads way
Yep.
more than LinkedIn's generating direct leads. And so I was trying to like kind of like specialize my Google search strategy, but I'm still missing out on like the rest of like, we talk about create demand. So I was really trying to, and I didn't like categorize it as create and capture at that time, but I was trying to be like, okay, if I can spend more money on Google search, and if I can get more money out of Google search, like from a pipeline revenue perspective, then maybe I can use some of that money that I'm asking for from leadership to put it into like a brand awareness play on LinkedIn. And so it was a little bit, I don't know if that's a bait and switch. You guys tell me, like maybe I was
No,
like,
we've all done it.
right. And so, but like, and so that was like how I could try to finagle it at that time in my career. But now I think, the main thing first is to really get your reporting set up, and like you have to have UTM value tracking through the pipeline. You have to have the high intent, low intent however you want to categorize it. Some people say hand raiser, non-hand raiser, some people say MQL or just a lead. And so however you want to categorize that, you have to have that set up. And then I think the conversation with leadership is more around what is marketing doing? Like, what are all of the dollars that we're spending driving? All of them, not just the dollars on LinkedIn, not just the dollars on Google search. And you do kind of like this blended analysis of marketing is spending this much money all up, and we are getting this much money in return in pipeline. And I'll pause there because I know there's a lot of nuance to that we can talk about, but from a high level, that's kind of how I would start with leadership is the total amount of money you're spending on your paid media and the total amount of money that's coming into the pipeline from those high intent sources. You can also, do content or low intent sources as well, but I'd focus really primarily on those high intent sources.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. It's kind of the initial step is bare minimum, right? Just like identify high and low for your organization, whatever that means. However, you're capturing the data currently, like if you could take 15 different lead sources or inbounds or to contacts, however you're like acquiring them, just break it out, understand what that is. So what percentage of our traffic currently is like high intent versus low intent, right? That's like an initial conversation that you can set the stage. And then if you can start putting like the dollars behind it. So marketing spent $50,000, 50% of that went to low intent, 50% of that went to high intent. Obviously it's not going to be, that's usually going to be 90-10. And then that's like another point of the conversation, right? So you like stair step each way. It's like, okay, here's the foundation of what I see. Here's what with the infrastructure we currently have in place. And then that also opens the door to your point of like, we need to improve our data integrity so we can have more sophisticated conversations around it. We need to implement UTM tracking beyond just like absorbing it to the contact. But I think what you said is like such the light bulb is like map that all the way through to the opportunity object if you're using Salesforce, or just make sure that you can identify that lead source and how they mature through the funnel. So when you do have those small wins, like that's like the aha moment, like, okay, we did invest in this and we are seeing an ROI in this channel, albeit we're still seeing growth in others. So I think it's very simple sounding, but I think that's how you have to approach it to your point. Like if that's all you have, that's all you can work with.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, just to like follow up really quick, I also think that it's like we're all marketers here. And so we tell stories. Like that's our job. We tell a story to a potential customer, and they either agree with that story, resonate with that story, or don't resonate with that story. And so it's all about having the access to the data and being able to tell the appropriate story to the appropriate audience. And what CMOs and VPs and executive level leadership, what they care about is my money that I'm spending getting something in return? And so at the very baseline, we have to figure out how to tell that story. And you're not going to tell that story if you're just looking at spend you're spending on LinkedIn, or if you're just looking at spend you're spending on Google search. So you really have to think a little bit bigger and like also take a step back and look at it from like a bird's eye view.
Totally. Yeah. The so what element, right? Like, why do I care about this? And why do I want to spend 30 minutes listening to you? Like, I think that that's important to go with that mindset, depending on your audience, always.
Yep.
Um, kind of thinking about like your journey, understanding that you wanted to make this switch, you wanted to transition a little bit into like more of a demand generation, holistic marketer. You've had the foundation of sales, you had the foundation of ops, and now you're kind of really on the front lines leading teams. Were there any sort of tools or like sort of mentors along the way that you think would be helpful for others that are listening to maybe think about adopting or trying to absorb?
Yeah. So I would say I think one of my biggest like pieces of advice and things that I've stumbled through in my career thus far is it's especially as a marketer, it's really easy for you to get super siloed into one thing, whether it's like a LinkedIn strategy or Google search. I mean, Google search is freaking intense. Like there's so much stuff on Google search and Google ads that like you can optimize and do. It's like a literal job. LinkedIn paid social is a literal job. And so there's so much with digital marketing and paid media that you can really like silo yourself into. And my biggest piece of advice is to step back and see the funnel and look at the customer journey as a whole. And that starts with someone, it actually starts wherever you feel like it starts in many different places. But I think it's really important to know exactly where your ads are going, who's potentially seeing those ads, and then what happens when they see those ads. Say they come to your website and then they fill out a form, and then what happens? I think a lot of times marketers, they stop at that. They say like, "Oh, we just got a form fill, great." Like, you as a marketer, you need to know the sales cycle. Like, you need to know what sales is doing and if they get those leads, and then what happens? How do they become an opportunity? What is the process? And can you recite it to yourself or back to me or whoever, like, you have to know those things. And I've just been fortunate to kind of, work in different pieces of that from like a marketing ops perspective, a sales ops, or not sales ops, but like sales SDR perspective, and on in demand gen. And I think even if you don't work in there, you still can ask questions. You still can connect with the folks that aren't on your immediate team to really understand what their job is, what is marketing ops job. And it just helps you paint a much better picture of what is happening in the customer journey. And then it makes you a stronger marketer because then you can identify gaps and identify the problems that you need to solve to make your money that you're spending become more valuable.
Do you have any tools that you've used to make this information digestible, either to leadership or to other marketers, to take everything that you just said, put it all together in a way that tells that story in a more like snapshot focused way?
Do
Or
you
is it
mean
all that like grunt spreadsheet work?
I don't have like a one tool to rule it all. I use a combination of like the marketing automation platform, like whatever your map is, and then your CRM. And I don't know if this is answering your question, but I would say like in my experience, the most successful that I've been is when I've felt I've had cohesion in my mind between what I know is happening in marketing automation platform and what I know is happening in Salesforce or your CRM, HubSpot, whatever it is. Um, and so what I mean by that is like a lot of times marketers will just spend time in the HubSpot or their Marketo or their Pardot, and they won't spend time in their Salesforce. I think it's highly important to spend time in both spots. Or like the salespeople will only spend time in Salesforce. That's fine. But I think as a marketer, you have to spend time in both your marketing automation platform and your CRM. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Steph, but I think that's probably my biggest recommendation of tools and how to like really apply yourself is to be very immersed in both of those systems as a marketer.
Yeah, I want to just jump in there real quick. It's true, everybody operates uniquely in terms of how they absorb information. One of the easiest things that I've always recommended to my team when they get started is like the rule of 10. So 10 questions that you have, write them down and find the answers. And that could be like on the ops side, how leads flow through. How are these leads getting to like the form? What is the form they're coming through? What happens after the form? What are the workflows? Write those down and make yourself answer those questions because those lead to 10 more questions. So it's like in any scenario, just start simple. Like just your framework should just be, what don't I know that I'm going to challenge myself to answer in the next 15 to 30 days? And then when I don't know that, you identify stakeholders to your point who you can kind of build conversations with. You can build the infrastructure around data integrity. So, it could be the simplest tool in terms of just holding yourself accountable. And I think that that's worked a lot for me. And hopefully that resonates for a few folks.
Yes, I love that. I actually have never heard of that, Evan, but that I love that. I think the biggest thing that you can do is like ask questions, be curious about something, and that's I feel like I remember that inflection point in my career. I was looking at like Google Ads and I was like, how do I make sure there's ROI from Google Ads? And then I was like directly and I was like, but how do I make sure there's ROI from LinkedIn? And so asking those questions leads you to data that will either answer your question or, like you said, Evan, have you ask more questions that will lead you to other types of answers. So I love that. That's really smart.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a great, relatively easy entry point as well. Even like you were saying, when you were making those sales calls,
Yeah.
having those questions asked to you, just writing that down, you didn't have an answer. And so, like, going out to find the answers will help you become a massive change maker in the industry. Like, that's such a cool story to see, is like the fact that you knew that something was off and you pushed forward to figure out why. That's why we're here today talking to you. But it's not all positive, good growth. Would you talk us through any moments in this journey that felt maybe insurmountable, or any missteps that you've encountered that you're willing to talk about?
Yeah. So I think this is recent and um it doesn't, I mean, it still feels like this has been a problem for a while, but here's what I am have been struggling with. And I think a lot of the market is struggling with it. When you shift your perspective to this, like, create, capture demand strategy, high intent, intent, funnel reporting strategy, um, there is still this question mark from leadership of, okay, I get it, Ciara. I know that, like, my high intent spend is generating pipeline on a positive level. Thank you. But I'm giving you 50 grand a month for LinkedIn, and I need you to tell me what that money is going towards. And so, as just like a data analyst or someone that is trying to, like, directly give them an answer, you want to be like, okay, well, I'm not driving leads from LinkedIn. So how do I tell that story?
Mhm.
And I've run into this a few times recently. And I mean, I've run into this for a lot of my career, and I think a lot of us are running into this. And I think the solution is, a lot of times now what we're doing is, it's less about the pipeline you're driving from these channels like LinkedIn, Meta, X, whatever it is. But it's more about, are you meeting these people are you meeting your target market on these platforms? And that is the question you have to ask. And that's the question and answer you need to give to your senior leadership. And then you quantify it. Yeah, you quantify it. And so you essentially say, all right, on LinkedIn, 50% of the MQLs that came in December have had impressions or clicks on LinkedIn. Therefore, the money has gone, like, what we're saying is we're spending, X per account that's had a click. And so that's what you want to start to reframe the conversation around. And it's less about, with these paid social and paid search channels, less about the pipeline you're driving directly from that, and more about the people that you're reaching, and then put a dollar amount behind that, like a cost efficiency metric, cost per account reached, cost per account engaged, things like that. And so that is what I would say has been a hiccup in my, honestly, the last, like, couple years, because I've definitely been stumped in calls or folks that are like, Ciara, yeah, I get it, but I need you to tell me why I'm spending 50K. And so it's really about choosing a different metric and reframing a different story, and moving away from direct pipeline attribution.
Yeah, you think about the data integrity. Also, sometimes it's just with the data that we have in the CRM, it's not feasible for us to paint that story when we are operating on a demand creation brand awareness play, where we're looking at audience saturation and messaging penetration to that audience. So definitely it's another point of, like, identifying what data gaps you have and what data can inform different discussions or lead you to a different path. So I love that. And I think just being vulnerable about, like, mistakes, we all feel like we all have been to that situation where we just, like, can't answer the question in the moment. And that's tough.
Yeah, because I think we all have been conditioned, and it makes sense. Like, the thing that makes the most sense in our head is, are we driving conversions or leads from these channels, and are they generating money for us? And that's what makes sense. But marketing doesn't work like that. We know that. The buying just process doesn't work like that. And so to figure out how to, like, attach different data points and KPIs to the buying process is where you're really going to win. And the ones you have to re-educate, your VP, re-educate your CMO to think about the value of money in a different way than just pipeline.
And this doesn't mean lead scoring.
No.
Uh,
No.
just saying. But as we think about, your journey as well and kind of the ups and downs, what would you say, like throughout this journey of your career of marketing, what is one thing that it's taught you about yourself? What have you appreciated most about your skills and passions because of the journey?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think like when you have a question in your head and you're like something feels off, like listen to that instinct and that like gut feeling in your body. And so I didn't really do that for like 10 years. And and like I think a lot of us didn't really do that. I actually will just speak for myself, but I didn't really do that for 10 years. And I knew something felt weird when I was a 22-year-old calling this person that just filled out a guide that they haven't read yet. And I was like trying to figure out how to talk to them about this guide that quite frankly I didn't even read. I was just like, do you want to have a meeting with my AE? And they're like, why would I do that? And so I just something felt off in that moment. And it felt off like that as I moved through my marketing career. And something I feel like I've learned in those years of just exploration is when something feels off, ask the questions either to yourself to start, write them down to yourself, see if you can figure out answers, and then start to talk to other people about it. Have dialogues, have brainstorms, ask other people those questions, see if anyone else is feeling the same like offness that you are feeling, and you'll probably get somewhere that you never really expected to get. And I just remember I was working, before I came to Refine Labs, I had this feeling for a long time. And then I started, listening to Chris on Demand Gen Live, and I was like, oh yeah, 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 yes, that's what I've been feeling for a decade. And I was just really grateful to Chris and the Refine Labs community to like actually operationalize it. And so I think we all have this feeling of what feels off and what doesn't feel off. And to kind of lean into that and surface it and like bring it out into the world and bring it out into the open is definitely one of the biggest things I've learned about myself, and also my piece of advice for anyone going through the same thing.
And that's how change happens. Like you have that conversation with someone else and you ask them that question and they don't have an answer. And
Totally.
then finally, you see someone on LinkedIn who's asking the same questions as you, and it builds this thread. And now everyone's asking the same question. And now we have something that is a lot easier to take to leadership or to make the change because it's something that is more universal that's happening and building and growing. And yeah, not keeping those questions to yourself because it's so easy, especially when you're young and just starting out, to say, well, I have these questions. I must be stupid, or I must be not paying enough attention, or I don't have the seniority to ask
Yeah.
someone higher up these questions. And like, yes, you do. And no, you're not stupid. Like, ask the questions and find where the information leads you. And that's where we get these like revolutionary ideas and growth in the industry. That's really cool.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, let's go to one of my favorite questions, but also least favorite, depending on your answer. Um, but no, talking about like as we think about 2025,
Yeah.
new year, in marketing, just the evolution that you've experienced, what shift do you expect or do you anticipate from your perspective? And how do you think people listening or other folks should kind of maybe challenge the way they're thinking about it and prepare?
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot in the back half of this year. All right. So I still think we have not a movement. I still think that in the industry, we are trying to attribute value to paid social and search channels. And when I mean value, I mean direct attribution, like we talked about in like this entire time. I still think that's happening. And I think the reason it's happening is because no one else knows what to attribute value to. And it's just like this just makes sense and it's easy and it makes sense in my head, right? And it's right there in front of me. But what I think is shifting and what I'm starting to see is that people, meaning companies, businesses in the industry, they're starting to understand the importance of brand awareness. They're starting to understand that we need to run brand awareness ads on our paid social channels and even paid search channels and educate the market about what we do, meet their pain points. That become known. And I don't think that's taboo anymore. That was taboo a few years ago. Some people are still kind of like getting on the train, but I think the train is moving. What I think is going to be changing in 2025 is, all right, this shift from, okay, I'm on the brand awareness train. I'm on it. I'm bought in. But someone tell me how I'm supposed to report out on brand awareness. Someone tell me how I'm supposed to attribute value to the money that I'm spending. And I've talked about this a little bit already, so I won't go into super high detail. But I think what 2025 is going to be about is now we're spending money on brand awareness. Let's figure out the KPIs for our business that we need to implement in our CRM and our reporting and our marketing automation platform that's going to show the value of money for brand awareness. And that LinkedIn is doing some really awesome things with reporting. LinkedIn's a great channel to do that with. I know Hockey Stack is like a new kind of up and coming software and tool that more businesses are starting to use. There are different versions of this. Metadata kind of does this too. It's really starting to try to figure out influence of these channels and the KPIs. And I think that is what 2025 is going to be about. And the businesses that can lock that are the businesses that are going to spend or unlock that are the businesses that are going to spend the appropriate amount of money on the channels where their target market is at.
Love that. It's like almost reframing, the demand create, demand capture to it's almost like brand now is create awareness. And then we have the
Yeah.
middle layer that's demand, which is capture. And then it's
Yeah.
almost going to be like evolving into like this idea of expanding. So I love that. It's like challenging how you categorize within your organization and having streamlined definitions is awesome. I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been great, Ciara. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing your journey with us, your expertise, and your time and insights. We hope that everyone listening will start questioning all of the things that just don't sit right with you and start tracking your leads with more thought and purpose. If you
Yes.
like hearing these journeys, make sure to subscribe and share this episode out to your network. And if you want to nominate a marketing hero to come on and chat with us, feel free to get in touch. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.